Am I audible and visible to everyone? Good morning, everyone. Shall we start the class now? Hello, everyone. Am I audible and visible to all of you? Should we start the class now? Okay, so I'm starting now since no response. Yeah, okay, so I'll start the class now. And today we are here with the first session of business communication. And we all know what do you mean by business communication. We'll be doing it. Today's first, let me tell you about the session plan today, what we are going to discuss. And today, basically, we are going to cover four topics. One is communication in business organization, why we need to communicate, what is its importance, and what kind of communication we are doing in business every day. In business environment, we are going to cover those topic in first topic. Next, we are going to cover about nature, scope, and process of communication. And third topic would be channels and network of communication. Fourth would be principles of effective communication. When we communicate, how effective our communication is. What are the points we should keep in our mind whenever we are communicating in business environment? Or rather, it shows your personality. When we communicate to other person, to other party, it shows how you are, how effectively you are trying to convey what you are trying to say. So let us begin with what do you mean by communication? When we hear this term communication, we understand we are trying to say something, we are trying to convey something to the other person, what we want them to interpret. We are basically trying to create a relationship or getting the work done by communication. It can be verbal, it can be non-verbal also. So that types of communication we are going to do. First, let us understand what is communication. If you talk about communication, it is derived from the Latin words that is communis, meaning to share. As I said, we want to share something, our opinion, our thoughts, our anything you want to. It can be shown by your body language as well. It can be shown by any signals. It can be written. It can be visual. So communication is the exchange of thoughts, messages, or information by speech, visuals, signals, writing, or behavior. It is the transmission of an idea or feeling so that the sender and receiver share the same understanding. We'll be doing it in detail about this. What the interpreter is interpreting is also very important. The listener, how he is interpreting your, decoding your message is very important. So communication is all about to share in terms of your thoughts, as I said, in terms of messages or information, either by speech, visual, signals, writing, or behavior. So when we talk about business environment, what do you mean by business communication? Here, one definition I have written here, the transmission of information within the business environment. The information may be transmitted, sent, and received between among the individuals. So this is the definition given by Mirror, Krizan and Mirror. So now, when we talk about communication, here we are talking, we are trying to understand in business environment. So meaning of business communication could be, business communication includes all day-to-day exchange of information among employees within the organization and by the management and employees with outside stakeholders, entities and agencies in course of doing business using different modes and media and formal and informal channel. Because see, when we are working in an organization, we are representing an organization, we are the face of the organization. How do we communicate to our stakeholder? How do we communicate to our parties or our agencies in terms of business dealing, in terms of getting your work done? It's very important. So most business communication is transactional. It involves give and take relationship between the sender and the receiver in order to establish a common understanding. What do you mean by sender and receiver? Here, if we talk about present scenario, I am trying to tell you something, and how you are interpreting, how you all are interpreting is also very important. Because whatever I have to say, I will go on telling the thing in my way. But how you are interpreting, how you are decoding my messages is also very important. It should have a common purpose. It should have a common understanding, right? So, media, if you talk about, there are types of communication we will be doing in detail. I'm just giving you an overview. What do you mean by communication? What are the things we need to understand when we talk about business communication? So, media, as an interpersonal communication, it can be verbal, non-verbal, oral, or written. Verbal media can be classified using the dimension whether it is a oral, written, whether it takes place in a small group, or it is meant for the large group. Written communication is more effective in transmission, and it can be retrieved. If you have written something and conveyed to something, you can always go back and see what was written. But when we talk about oral communication, you cannot go back and see the exact things what you have conveyed to that person. So, on the other hand, as I say, it is face to face communication is more effective because immediately you get the feedback, immediately you get the opinion, and the way the person is taking your message. So it has both the pros and cons with both the communication. So telecommunication technology has changed mode of meetings. Nowadays, teleconferencing has become more common to communicate with a different location. Anywhere they can communicate. People from the different part of world can now confer without meeting with each other. Need not to be travel to communicate with each other, to talk to each other, to have a meeting. While this has facilitated the communication, it has also affected the social interaction adversely. Because previously people used to go for a meeting to the head office or anywhere. Nowadays it is happening more often on the teleconferencing. So what I said was oral, and there are, when we talk about oral and written communication, oral is can be, when we talk about a small group, oral can be either can be done by the conversation, as I said, through the face to face or through the telephone. Now, written is, if you talk about small group, we can write a memos, we can email them, we can text them, we can write a letter to them. But when we talk about large group, when we talk about oral communication for a large group, it happens in terms of lectures, meetings, radio, closed circuit TV, and teleconferencing. When we talk about large group for the written communication, it has to happen in a circular so that everybody should read and sign that they have read this message. Newsletters, handbook, manuals, poster, bulletin board, and email. So this is basically different verbal media in organizational communication. Now, we are keep on talking about communication is important, but how it is, what is the goal of business communication? Basically, when we talk about business environment, how the receiver is understanding. As I said, it is very, very, very important. Whatever I am conveying is not only important, it is how the other side is taking it also very important. So receiver's response, how do they are interpreting and how do they are understanding that message, and whether it is working on a favorable relationship or not, whether they are agreeing to your message, where they have understood or not. And definitely the goal of business communication is organizational goodwill, right? So these are the basic goals, and let us understand what are the importance of business communication. This we will be doing it in detail, components of communication. Like if you take the example of sender, I am here a sender of my messages, and encoder, there is a medium, this is a platform of IIBM where I'm trying to convey my material, study material to you all, and this is a channel, and receiver, you all are the receiver, and you are going to provide the feedback about it, whether you have understood or not. So these are the component of communication. Now, group and mass communication, as I said, it can happen through newspaper, it can happen through media, it can happen through TV channels. So mass communication, we will be doing it in detail about these types of communication. Now, when we talk about business organization, what we think, what type of information we are going to share, it cannot be pre-decided, but of course there are the categories on which the type of information exchange in the business organization can be understood. So broadly, all business communication can be divided into 5 types of information in business environment. So first is statutory information, in the information such as terms and condition of the services. which needs to be conveyed to all people, which needs to be understood by the people, whoever is working in the organization. What are the terms and condition of their services? So this information, for this information, to convey this information, business communication plays an important role. How effectively they are trying to create an awareness with the employees about the statutory information. This is the one type of information in the business organization environment which needs to be conveyed properly. Next is regular work situation. The information regarding normal work situation has to be regularly communicated through routine. Day-to-day communication, day-to-day target, day-to-day changes in the work pattern, if it is happening in an organization, should be conveyed. It can be oral, it can be written, depends on the company, depends on the situation. So this is the one type of information exchange which is required in the business organization. One is regular, second is regular work situation. Now, third type of information which we need to share with the people, whoever is working in the organization, is major policy or operational change information. So, as the name says, major policy, what are the policy prevailing in the organization? What are the handbook? What are the things a person should know, which is bound by the organization to follow by all the employees? So, any major change in the organizational policy, work which is going to affect everyone or a large number of employees has to be communicated. Otherwise, how they will be aware about it? So, this is the third type of information that needs to be exchanged in the business organization. Now, next is information bulletin. To keep people informed about events and happening taking place in the organization in form of annual bulletin, because every organization will have everything, whatever their achievements, whatever how far they could reach the target. So the people who is working in all different departments should know that where their organization stand in the market, or what is their shares in the market, and what is their share of profit. Everything should be incorporated in the information bulletin. So to keep people informed about events and happening taking place in the organization in form of annual bulletin is communicated to all employees of the company. Next is communication by expectancy. This means information of critical changes should be carefully and gradually communicated to those who are going to be directly affected by the decision. Suppose a company is trying to work for the night shift. The person who is assigned for the night shift should be communicate properly, or which can be expected by the employer should be communicated, because that person will be affected. So many other situations. I have given a very small example here. So many other changes which are affecting the directly employee in any case should be informed by the employer so that he should be prepared. He or she should be prepared. So these are the five category or types of information which are generally shared in an organization in day-to-day basis. So I hope I'm audible and clear to all of you. Okay, sure. So I'll continue with the session. So now this is what we have till now we have covered is meaning, what, how, like what is the goal of business communication, and what are the categories and types of information which is being shared in an organization in business environment. Now let us understand, we keep on talking that communication is very important. So what is the role of communication in business organization? If we talk about role, it has a broad, I mean, it has a very and a very long list to share, because communication is definitely is your how you are going to communicate to the other side of the person. So let's understand point by point. One is information sharing. The main purpose of communication is to transmit information for a source to target individual or a group. We understand this term by now. Now next is feedback. So there is a need to give feedback to the employees on their achievement, which is very important for an employee to be motivated to work even more harder, or even if he's not working where he's lacking, it should be conveyed to that person. So feedback is very important, and which can be done through a communication only, either in a written form or in a verbal communication. So to the department on their performance, and to the higher management on the fulfillment of goals and difficulties encountered in the communication of feedback helps in taking corrective measures and making necessary adjustments, and it motivates people in developing challenging and realistic plans. So for the both the parties, it is very important. If the employee is working, he should be aware that how much he has achieved. And for the organization, what was their goal, what was their target, and how far they could reach there. So feedback is very important and it can be done in a proper way of communication. It cannot just happen either in a way. If you talk about, it needs to be communicated properly so that where they are lacking, what kind of adjustment they need to do in the work pattern, it has to be communicated. So now next is influence. Information is power. We know that information is very crucial and timely information is also very important. One purpose of communication is to influence people. The manager communicates to create a good environment, right attitude, and collegial working relationship. Because if the manager is not motivating his team, the team will not work effectively. So, the role of communication is to influence people, to motivate people to have a feeling of working harder for the organization. So influence is one role of communication in business organization. Next is problem solving. In many cases, communications aim to solve problems. Communication between the management and unions on some issue, any kind of negotiation. We know about trade union and everything. So it has to be done because it is a role of a communication which helps in problem solving. So it aimed at a solution of a problem. Next is assist in decision making. The most important function of every manager decision making is in order to make accurate and appropriate decision. A manager needs to obtain information available in various channels of communication. Facilitating changes, the effective of change introduced in an organization depends to a large extent on a clarity and spontaneity of a communication. Now, see, these all are interrelated. If you think it is actually one thing, we are trying to achieve our goal, we are trying to align our goal with the organizational goal in terms of how we are communicating. So what is the role of communication we are trying to understand here. Now it helps in group building. Communication helps in building a relationship, is very clear. If communication breaks down, the group may disintegrate. Communication provides the necessary lubrication for the proper functioning of a group. Because if the person is not communicating with each other in a group, how they will work? They will not be able to work towards the organizational goal. Next is gatekeeping. Communication helps to build linkage of organization with the outside world. The organization can use its environment to increase its effectiveness. Conveying the right messages. The main object of communication is to convey the right message to the right person. So, for the person whom it is meant to, we are just communicating our message, but the person who is responsible for that work should be communicated. So, helps in coordination and effort. Communication is an effective tool for coordinating activities of a different person engaging in running a business. Now, next role can be development of managerial skills. Communication helps manager to understand human behavior at work. Communication of facts, ideas, opinions, information, feeling, etc. add value to the knowledge of managers about various happening in the organization and behavior of the people. Thus, communication is also a process of learning because it's helping a person to develop their managerial skills. Now, next role would be ensuring effectiveness of the policies because the way we are communicating about the policies, the way we are trying to convey, guide the workforce is it should be done in a proper way. So, the organization formulates the policies and programs to guide the workforce. This should be conveyed properly to those who are really responsible for execution of work to achieve the organization objectives. Actually, we keep on talking about it. Communication helps in motivating people because until unless you will be knowing how good you are writing your exams, how good you are trying to convey your understanding, it's very important for people to have motivation. So, if people working in an organization are not regularly informed about their management expectations, plans, and policies with respect to their future career and growth, promotion, and welfare measures, they feel frustrated and demotivated. Through various communication devices, managers declare rewards and incentives to the motivate employees. Now, It's everything is interlinked if you think about the role of a performance. Now, performance feedback. People working in an organization need to know where they are performing and what needs to be done, achieve and exceed the standards set by the management. Whether their personal goal is aligned with the organizational goal or not, that needs to be taken care. So now next is job instructions. Manager need to communicate to their subordinates the job instructions in terms of requirement of the job from time to time. Failure on the part of managers in communicating these instructions may lead to confusion, wastage, and inefficiency in the organization. Now, next is controlling people. Every organization has its own rules, regulation, and procedures framed by the management in order to perform various activities to regulate the behavior of a people. Therefore, an organization issues notice, circulars, letters, etc. to communicate the existing change and rule, regulation, and procedure. So, it helps to control people. It helps to understand that what needs to be conveyed and how it has to be. Suppose a circular is being circulated among the employees and they had signed that particular circular for that particular changes or policy in the organization. So the management will have control that these many people have read the circular or notices and they are aware and they cannot go beyond this instruction. So it helps in controlling people. Next is useful as a grapevine. We have understand this term. Grapevine communication is basically informal communication. It means that everything cannot just happen on the paper or cannot happen officially. So informal communication or a grapevine organization in organizations sometimes leading to rumors. It often used by employees to create misunderstandings. But sometimes management also take the help of this route to assess the impact and reaction of employee before introducing a proposed policy change in the organization. Suppose they are doing something, some kind of changes in the organization. Suppose they are making a Saturday, second and fourth Saturday off, or they are making it as a working Saturday, but they want to understand what will be the reaction for the employee. So what they can do, they can informally, they can circulate that information. That is known as informal communication, or which is known as a grapevine communication in the organization, which is not decided by the organization, which is not written anywhere, which is not conveyed by the organization, but it is a information which is being shared and the ideas or the opinion or the feedback can be taken by that. Sometimes, as I said, it leads to a rumor, it leads to be create a misunderstanding. Suppose some person is getting promotion and if people are just spreading that news and other people are not happy with that promotion, so sometimes it creates misunderstanding as well. But many times it has been very useful for the organization to have a grapevine communication. So next is emotive function. Communication facilitates the expression of feeling and satisfaction. It also enables the people to express their dissatisfaction, unhappiness through words or in writing to release their tension and frustration. That is why in organization there exists a grievances resolution machinery, and often manager and supervisors are trained how to handle employee emotional problem and grievances, because every organization HR department will definitely have a grievances cell where the employee can go and they feel free to communicate their problems or their whatever they are feeling unhappy about it, and it will not be disclosed until unless he or she wants to disclose that. So manager and supervisors are being trained, because every employee, every human being is a resource for an organization. If the person has a talent, organization will not want them to go for any other problems, so they will try to resolve that problem. So here the business communication role is very important. It acts as an emotive function. Next is good industrial relation. When we talk about business environment, we talk about industrial relation. And how we are going to do to make an industrial relation, we are going to make through our communication, whether it is a written form or an oral form. So communication develops a good industrial relation as it conveys the feelings, ideas, opinions, and viewpoint of one party to other party. The two parties, the management and the subordinates, come closer through communication only. They understand each other and dispel any misunderstanding. Thus, it promotes cooperation and good industrial relation. And if the good industrial relation is not positive, not harmonious, it will spoil your image and you may lose a business proposal there. So now, when we talk about this is how role, what is the role of business communication in business environment, and it has so many functions to help to act as a as a channel for the person to communicate your thing is that creates a business environment is communication is very important. So in professional world, communication and related skill decide a person's career curve. Because sometimes you see a person's speaking skill is not good and he is trying to develop a relation with the parties to get a deal, to get an order from that particular person. So he may not be able to perform that well. So it helps to decide a person's career curve. Better the communication skill, higher the chances of touching the zenith success. The new global and diverse workplace requires excellent spoken and written communication. So by now we or obviously we understood it is very important to have a good communication skill, which is communication skill constitute an important aspects of effective management of business enterprises. Some important function of management is forecasting determines the organizational objective and policy. So now here we are trying to see how organization is trying to communicate forecast their organizational objective and policies. What are the functions of business communication for the management? Planning prepares the programs, procedures, and budget. Organizing sets the organizational structure. Instructing provides the foundation of organization performance. Coordinating ensures all efforts are directed towards the organizational goals. Controlling checks the results, receives the feedback. The function of communication is to define and support the action involved in each of our functions. Now, when we were talking about forecasting and planning, each function depends on effective communication for its success. If the management failed to communicate its objective, policies, programs, precision, and budgetary provision to the concerned people at the proper time, the organization would fail to run in an organized and targeted manner. Because if the objective is not being conveyed properly, and what are the procedure a person has to employee has to follow, so which is being not being communicated properly, then the organization will definitely fail. So role here again the function depends on the effective communication, forecasting and planning. Next is organizing. Organizing as a management function determines the formal and informal relationships between organization and outside it. These relationships are developed and maintained through interpersonal communication. Because interpersonal, when you see the job description nowadays, what you find on the topmost, it is written a good communication skill or interpersonal communication skills should be very good of anybody. So this is nowadays it's demanding for a person to communicate well. So next is instructing. The function of instructing wholly depends upon the interpersonal exchange of information regarding the product, process, and targets for its success. So a person whether he is able to communicate properly about the product or not, because nowadays organizations do provide a training about the product, about the details and everything, but how the person is taking it and how he is conveying to the other outside of the organization is also very important. Coordinating as a manager function is perhaps the most demanding of all functions. It requires excellent communication skills to ensure that all efforts are directed towards the achievement of a single organization goal. To see that diverse activities are unified into a single whole, the manager should be able to relate with all people formally and socially. Finally, for controlling, the manager should have competence to receive information and respond quickly. Hence, an active communication system is vital for good health of an organization. If there were a continuous sharing of ideas, interactive meeting between the management and the worker, the overall atmosphere of understanding and goodwill would prevail in the workplace. Now, this is all about the meaning and the understanding and the role and how important it is in the organizational setting. Now, let us understand what is the scope of communication and how do we uh, bifurcate it? How do we understand there are a category? So, the scope of communication can be understood under two headings. One is external dimension, another is internal dimension. So here we have completed our first topic, that is meaning of business communication, what is its importance, roles, and how effective communication is very needed in an organization for a employee perspective as as well as from the employer perspective. So, is it clear to all of you till now? Yeah, tell me, Tapas. What is business communication? Okay, wait. Business communication is how we are communicating. There are different types of business communication, which we'll be doing it in the like letters, in form of letters, in forms of circulars. How do we communicate? How do we convey our ideas in an organization in terms of achieving the organizational goal? That is known as business communication. How do we communicate? What kind of communication should be? How important is business communication? Communication in an organization? That's what we are trying to understand here. Is it clear now, Tapas? And one more person was. Is it clear, Tapas? Okay. Shall I continue now? Okay. Because this is what we are trying to understand here. We are trying to basically understand that if we communicate what the other side is interpreting, if you're not clear in our communication, how do you achieve your target in an organization? Suppose you are explaining about a product and you're not able to if communicate effectively and precisely and clearly, so the person will not understand about your product and he is not going to do any kind of dealing. So we are trying to understand what is business communication and how important it is, and what is the role of business communication in business environment. So we'll continue with the next step, next unit, that is scope of communication in organizational setting. As I said, there are two dimensions here. One is external, another is internal. The name itself is very clear. External means how do we communicate outside the organization and how do we communicate inside the organization for the day-to-day activity, for the dealing with the other departments or dealing in same team when we are talking. So there are two dimensions. Let us understand first the external dimension. As I said, external dimension regarding the communication have a bigger arena. It includes building a relationship with the external agencies and stakeholders. And it is a very important because you are the face of the organization. How you are talking about your organization is very important because it's spreading in outside the organization. Inside communication is also very important, but external, it is going beyond your control when you are communicating. You're just saying it will go out and it will be conveyed to the stakeholder and other persons. So, communication in international relations, this is the age of globalization, and due to tremendous development in communication, the entire world is viewed as a single village. We know that now, due to globalization, we are having a people outside the country also. They have offices. Now, we are not restricted to one place. So, changes are taking place all over the world, and in order to cope with the latest development of the world, every person, organization, and state is communicate with the different quarters very rapidly. The diplomatic, economic, and trade relation between the among nation and the international arena are based on the effective and efficient business communication. Now, when we were talking about role of business communication, we did speak about this industrial relations. So communication in industrial relation, that means owner-employee relation is prerequisite to bring success in business. To build a harmonious employer-employee relationship, the Department of Public Relations of each organization act closely under the directive of top management, and communication is dispensable here. Now, effective communication can establish a healthy external organizational climate, which is there is trust, cooperation, collaboration, innovation, and commitment. Self-involvement of the people in various activities included inculcate to create vibrant and a very harmonious relationship. Now, when we talk about internal dimension, the lot of communication takes place within the organization. An organization starting from formulating corporate vision, mission, policy, objective, taking goals to their implementations, communication plays a significant role. For formulating policies, top management need to obtain information, views of a middle and lower level management through various forms. Because whenever they are trying to create a new thing in the organization, they need to obtain information from the each level of an employee, so that what they do feel, they should feel involved in the organization. That policy is being made by their information, by the communication, means of communication, how they are communicating about their ideas. So for formulating policies, top management needs to obtain information and views of a middle and lower level management through various forms, especially for the appropriate implementation of the top management policies and plans. It is only communication which facilitates proper understanding of policies in a right spirit. Within each department and across every different department, functional heads have to communicate to their subordinates by giving a job-related instructions, suggestions, advice, and orders for obtaining and giving the cooperation to the other department. Exchange of information plays a key role. When we look at the each functional department, the scope of communication further becomes clear. Suppose, for example, here I have written here in the PPT, in case of human resource department, the manager needs to take care of communication to avoid grievances, dissatisfaction, industrial unrest in the entire organization. Communication skill is essential for manager to design, write advertisement copies, conducting effective interviews, arranging better training program, etc. So here what we are trying to say, when we look at the HR department, what we are trying to understand, what are the internal dimension of communication when we talk about business communication. So when we take a HR department, HR management, what all type of communication he is going to do within the organization. That's what I have written here. One will be grievances, other will be dissatisfaction and industrial unrest in the organization. So communication is, it's not restricted to one department. That's what we are trying to understand here. It is like we are for each individual accounts department. When we talk about accounts department, there is an interrelation communication which has to be done properly. For exchanging information with the people inside and outside the organization, a variety of formal and informal forms of communication are used in the table. Here we have segregated in the table. One is internal and external. Formal, when we talk about internal communication, is formal will be planned communication among the insider. That is for the letters, reports, memos, and email, and that follows the company chain of command. Next is informal, casual communication among employees like email, face-to-face conversation, that do not follow the chain of command. That formal means it has to be from the some authority. Informal could be for sharing. Suppose if I want to share any information which is needed to that person for preparing a project, that is known as informal. Internal communication, form of communication. Now, when we talk about external, formal would be planned communication with outsiders, like again in terms of letters, reports, memos, speech, website, and news release. And when we talk about informal, it is casual communication with the suppliers, customers, investor, and other outside. It can happen face to face also, and it can happen on email or phone calls. Now, we all know the communication environment is changing, and there is a new communication environment nowadays, and which has created lots of challenge in the organization to communicate well. So some external environment variables that directly impact on all forms of business communication includes a new communication technology. Globalization of market. We'll be doing it little bit about it. It has given in your study material in very detail, but I have taken a very very small detail about each of the points here. New work environment, flattened managerial hierarchies, team-based management, and a new knowledge economy. So when we talk about new communication technology, as I said, emergence of new innovative communication technologies completely revolutionized the way of we communicate. Now we exchange information by email, voicemail, and instant messaging. Through teleconferencing, video conferencing, we can conduct meeting with associates around the world. Moreover, we now make tremendous use of internet and web for collecting information, serving customers, and promoting product and services. In the words of Uwe et al., such technological advancement not only bring new and better tools to the workplace, but also increase the speed, frequency, and reach of communication. Now, you can immediately reach to any person in spite of distance, spite of time zone, anything. Now, as I say, everybody is available 24 into 7 for their work emergencies, for their requirement for the job. So new technology, communication technology has really helped people to communicate easily at any given point of time. Now, next is globalization of markets. Small, medium, and large companies increasingly find themselves competing in a global rather than local market. Improved system of telecommunication, advanced form of transportation, saturated market in US and most European countries. All these developments have made more and more business in these countries crossing the national boundaries, set up operation in emerging market of Asia and other part of world and operate on a global scale. If you talk about before 90s, it wasn't so easy to do any business outside India. And in fact, the US people cannot come here or any other country, UK, US, any place people cannot come and open their office here. But due to globalization, it has really helped people to grow more, to uh, deliver your product, to understand the other culture of other country, work culture to the different countries. So it has happened. It has really helped people, but it is also challenging to communicate with the other person effectively. The successful communication in these new markets requires developing new skills such as cultural knowledge and sensitivity, flexibility, patience, and tolerance. Because when we are talking outside your country, we don't know their culture, what they may not like, what kind of a sensitivity they have towards the work for that particular deal. So when we talk about communication, it has to be very clear and concise, because these are the skills and traits that the most of us needs to polish. Companies entering foreign markets are required to provide a special communication training to help their manager to deal with the intercultural business transactions. As I said, we need to understand what different culture is prevailing in the other side of the, if we suppose we are doing our business in other country. So as I said, increasing diverse workforce. We understand the meaning of diverse. Diverse means nowadays it's not restricted to one culture. Changes in today work environment include more than new technology, team management, and different work routine. Team made up of a different people, because nowadays we have a diverse workforce. It's not necessary that North Indian people cannot go to South and work there. It has a mix of crowd now with a different background, different belief system, different thought process. So team made up of a different people with different experiences are more likely to create the different product that the consumers demand. Learning to cooperate and communicate successfully with diverse co-workers should be a major priority to all business people. Now, new work environment as a result of global competition, restructuring, and mobile technology, it is no surprise that we are also seeing many changes in the work environment. Obviously, we are connected all the time with the people. Anybody can reach to you at any moment of time. All development are encouraging flexible working arrangement as well. Now people can work from home also. The company wants their work to be done, whether it is work from home or from the office. So and because this is happening, because we are working on a global platform nowadays. Now we are working in a different time zone nowadays. So now next point is flattened management hierarchy. In response to intense global competition and other pressures, business have for years been cutting costs and flattening their management hierarchies. This flattening means here that the fewer layer of managers separate decision makers from the line workers. In traditional company, information flows through many levels of managers. In flat organization, however, there is a line of communication are shorter. Decision makers are react more quickly to market changes. Initially, the flow of information was from so many levels. But nowadays, to reduce cost, to make a quick decision, to have the immediate changes in the policy or a decision, they want to react more quickly, we can say. So now they are they are having the hierarchy which is flattened now. But today's flatter organization also bring greater communication challenges. In the past, authoritarian and hierarchical management structure did not require that every employee to be a skilled communicator. Right? Managers simply passed along messages to the next level. Today, however, frontline employee as well as the manager participate in decision making. Their input and commitment are necessary for the organization to be successful in global market. Nearly all employees have computers and write their own messages. So how you are writing? Initially, when we talk about traditional work culture, it was not important for all the levels to communicate effectively. But now, because of this flattened management hierarchy, it is very important because now anybody can be part of your decision making. They have to communicate effectively. Now, next is team-based management. Along with a flatter chain of command, companies are also turning to concept of team-based operations. According to the author, the command and the control style of traditional management structure is ineffective in today's fast-paced e-commerce environment. Successful companies no longer limit decision to a few managers at the top of the formal hierarchy. Previously, it was restricted to the top manager only, but nowadays it's not happening. Instead, organizations use teams collaborative work group to make fast decisions required to succeed a global and the competitive market. Lot of opinion and ideas is being taken care so that the prime reason was to have a wider opinion about that product or the changes, or you can say to employees also feel involved. Each and every employee will feel involved in the organization and decision making. Next is to function in a team based organization. You must understand how group interact, reach decision, work collaboratively, and resolve conflict. When working in a team, you should be able to clarify, confirm, give feedback, explore ideas, and credit others. Because when you are working in a team, you're not restricted your managers to communicate with the people. You're not just giving your ideas to you can work in a team, you can communicate freely with them. And we can say it is now team-based management. Initially it wasn't. So now because of that communication plays an important role here. We need to communicate your feedback, your ideas, your opinions, and you need to credit others. Means here, if the other person is doing the work effectively, you need to admit that. You need to explain to the people that here you should give a credit to that person basically. Doing so requires a basic understanding of communication process and organizational setting. Now, next is the new knowledge economy. Nowadays, as I said, the 9 to 5 jobs are gone. Lifetime security, predictable promotion, and even the conventional workplace. We don't presume that the companies will provide with a clearly defined career path or a planned development experiences. And don't wait for someone to empower you. You have to empower yourself. You cannot do the spoon feeding here. You need to empower yourself. You need to enhance your skills so that you can be very competitive. You can be an asset for an organization. To thrive in a new work world, you must flexible and continually willing to learn new skills and supplement the strong foundation of basic skills you acquire in the college. Probably the most important foundation skill for knowledge workers in the new environment is ability to communicate. This means being able to listen and to express your ideas. Communication is not only to convey, it's communication important. We'll be doing this is how do you listen? How effectively you are listening. Suppose I am taking you a lecture and how effectively you are listening. Quietly you are listening and trying to understand what we are trying to say here. So listening is also an important part of communication. So, and express your ideas effectively in writing and in any form, in speech as well. As you advance in your career, communication skills even more important. The number one required for promotion to management is ability to communicate. So this is all about what are the scope of communication in business environment. So now we will be going to the third topic that is ethical challenges and traps in business communication. How how communication should be ethical. We are going to understand here. So this is clear to all of you till now. Internal dimension. Internal dimension, as I said, Tapas, internal dimension is basically what we are trying to understand here. Did you hear the first slide? The first slide says that we have a scope of business communication in two different dimensions. When we talk about external dimension, how a person is communicating outside the organization. And internal, when we talk about internal dimension here, internal dimension means here that how we are communicating with each other in a team or in an inter-department, how we are communicating internally in an organization. It's not what we are talking to our stakeholder, what we are talking to our business partners. Internal dimension is how we are communicating inside the organization. What are the challenges? As I gave you the example of HR department, we think that HR department has to communicate to the different department. No, but they have a different segment to communicate. They have to take care of grievances. They have to take care of promotions. They have to take the feedback. They have to recruit the people. So there are different forms of communication which is happening internally in an organization. So this is the internal dimension. When we talk about internal dimension, this is what we are trying to say here. How we are talking about other person. Suppose I have to give a promotion to other person. What are the points we are highlighting about that person? I cannot decide on my own. I need to have a proper communication for that. Suppose we are transferring a person from one location to other location for with a promotion or anything. We need to highlight that we need to communicate to the people why only this person is responsible for this. Anything which is happening in an organization is happening through a communication only. How do we share? How do we share our ideas? How do we share our opinion? Is that clear, Tapas? Okay. So shall we go to the next? Okay. So I hope you are understanding what we are trying to understand here. Why business communication is very important. We say that okay, we had just have to say that, but what are the pros and cons when we talk to the other person? As I gave you the example of HR department, it can be with any other department. You're working in a project in an organization, suppose, and you're working effectively. You feel that you have worked well, but the promotion is given to other person. What are the criteria? It needs to be communicated to the person why he is more eligible for that promotion. Why can't the other person is eligible? It needs to be communicated. So communication is very vital in an organization. It is a lifeline for an organization. How do you communicate with the people about your ideas? What are the bases? You just cannot say your thing, and you need to have a proper way of informing the people. Right? So let us continue with the ethical challenges and traps in business communication. The last decade has seen an increased ethical awareness among the business organization all over the world. What we say here, ethical means being ethical climate. If you look at the newspaper, you just look at around, what do we see? We see explosion of unethical practices. Unethical means the person who is having sitting at the very authoritative point. He is doing something wrong with the organization, either for the personal gain or for the organizational benefit. If you look at their background, they are highly educated person, they know everything, they belong to a very rich background, but still there is an unethical practices. So when we communicate, when we try to communicate with a person about your product, about your policy, about your guidelines, it has to be ethical. It has to be. So, what are the challenges we are going to try to understand here? So, as I said, the last decade has seen an increased ethical awareness among the business organizations all over the world. As Buffy in 2000 points that the estimated 95% of Fortune 500 corporations as well as many smaller companies have now adopted the ethics statement or code of conduct inside the organization. It has to be an ethical code of conduct. Despite this trend, unethical behavior continues to plug the business world. As I said, if you look around the people, if you look at the newspaper, you will find so many unethical practices prevailing in the business environment. So there are examples of failure where some of the world's largest corporations have suffered financially as well as form of tarnished image because of unchecked unethical practices. What do we mean by here before going to the next slide? Let me make you very clear. Suppose I am holding a very confidential information for an organization. This is again the role of communication comes here. If I am leaking that information to the other party and that person is getting benefited by that information, then it is an unethical communication. This is a means of unethical practices which may be not helping me, which may not be giving me monetary benefit, but because of lack of communication, effective communication, I leak that information. And that person is being benefited and an organization suffers because of that leaking information, right? So now when we talk about the most common violations were as follows. One is cutting corners on quality. what we say and we are not providing to the customer. When we communicate to the customer that we are providing this, if you think nowadays, lot of misleading advertisement of product are being done. If you talk about misleading advertisement means here to gain more profit. Suppose take an example of any product, any cosmetic product you take that will make you fair, but actually it is not making you fair. That is one point. They are attracting the people who is having a dark color, and they are trying to not provide that quality to that product to the people. So the communication what we are doing is unethical here. So cutting corners on quality, covering up incidences, using in about lying about sick days, deceptive customers, lying to the supervisor or underling, taking credit for the colleague's idea. Suppose I have given any ideas and someone go to talk to their supervisor that this is my idea. So this is taking credit of colleagues' ideas, misleading advertisements, as I said. I gave you an example as well. So these are the common violation for with which we say these are the unethical practices in communication. What do we communicate? It should be clear, it should be correct, it should be ethical. So, according to the Boville HR, ethical communication includes all relevant information. It's true in every sense and not deceptive in any ways. By contrast, unethical communication can include falsehood and misleading information. Some example of unethical communication are plagiarism. Plagiarism, what do you mean by? Suppose you are writing a research paper or you are writing a thesis for your research topic, right? And what we are doing, you are copying the material from other website and you are pasting on your research topic either in form of literature review or in terms of anything, conclusion or about the, suppose if you're writing a detailed report on work environment of an organization and you are copying some other research, that is known as plagiarism, taking other works into your work, right? Now, next is selective misquoting. We do when we talk about communication, selective misquoting is also one of the things which can be done. Falsifying numbers when we are trying to project your profit or we are taking, giving a false idea about your numbers that this much profit was done during the this financial year. So these are the types of unethical practices which is known when we communicate this, it's counted as an unethical communication. Distorting visuals, this is also again about your product, about your about your detailed analysis of anything. So some example of unethical communication includes plagiarism, as I said, stealing someone else's words or work and claiming as it is your own. Next is selective misquoting, means deliberately omitting the damaging or unflattering comments to paint a better picture of your company. What you have, you're not just trying to hide that, whatever is the weaknesses, and you are picturizing as a very good thing about your company. That is known as selective misquoting. Misinterpreting numbers, increasing or decreasing number, exaggerating, alerting statistics, or omitting numerical data. Suppose this much bikes you have sold for a year and you are writing in a less number or an increased number just to highlight your company. That is also known as unethical communication, distorting visuals, making a product look bigger or changing the scale of graph and charts to exaggerating on concealed differences. When you are doing online purchase, if you see the product size and everything, nowadays they are being very clear. They write detailed description of the product so that you can visualize this centimeter into this centimeter or this is all about the your product. So some people are using distorting visuals so that the customer should get attracted and they should buy. This is also an unethical means of communication. An ethical message is accurate. An ethical message is accurate and sincere. It avoids language that manipulates, discriminates, or exaggerates. Right? So when we understand the ethical issues that has happened, how how to understand that thing, when we talk about ethical issues, what are the dilemmas which we encounter as a person, as a when we talk about as an employer or as an employee. When we talk about ethical dilemma, what does it mean? It means like we are in dilemma. Suppose we have conveyed something wrong about our organization, we have communicated something wrong and to the stakeholder, which is basically conflicting loyalties and which will definitely lead to the difficult trade-offs, right? So how to deal with that? What do we do? Because maybe organizational target or something will get suffered. This dilemma usually comes with the employer and the employees. Now, next is ethical lapses. Because we take that ethical lapses happen because of the business pressure. We do have targets. Every individual do have targets to achieve that much during that month of time. So it, peer pressure or a business pressure is one reason to happen that illegal choices sometimes we take unethical choices. So these are the two terms we need to understand: ethical dilemmas and lapses. As I said, Bivita Ital has described how a business organization and managers faces ethical dilemmas and how at a time they make clearly unethical choices in attempting to fulfill their responsibilities to various groups, customers, employees, shareholders, suppliers, neighbors, community, and the nation. Unfortunately, what is right for one group may be wrong for other group. Take an example of Shada Group, which has taken a which has done financially. They have cheated the customers, if you think in that way. But the person who was heading that team, he was doing for the organization. He wasn't responsible for the. He wasn't looking at the customer perspective. He was just looking at the organizational perspective. So ethical dilemma and lapses can cause because of these two reasons. An ethical dilemma involves choosing among the alternatives that are not clear, and both are ethical and valid. And maybe, sometimes you need to decide which is good for, maybe good for the other person and maybe not good for the organization. So you need to understand what is right and wrong. So ethical dilemma can happen that time. Unlike dilemma, ethical lapses is making a clearly unethical or illegal choices. Dilemma is somehow we are thinking what to do, what is right or what is wrong. But illegal choices is clear cut choices. You are provide profile. As I gave an example of illegal choices is agreeing to provide profiles of your current company's big customer to its main competitor in your bid to secure a lucrative job offer. Maybe some other my competitor is asking me to do a favor about the present company, and he or she is offering me a better job over there with a big monetary benefit. So I am doing it that for this is known as ethical lapses, and it has a clear cut illegal decision, illegal choices or unethical practices which we are doing it sometimes. And you see n number of examples you will find. If you look at the newspaper or the Google search, you will find not many people are doing this due to some personal gain or some very few time for the organizational benefit. So now let us understand five common ethical traps. One is the false necessity trap, convincing yourself that no other choice exists. I have to go with this now. The doctrine of relative filth trap, comparing your unethical behavior with someone else even more unethical behavior. You are thinking that that person is doing it, why can't I do that? What is wrong if I do that way? So this is the another trap, ethical trap you can say. Now next is rationalization trap, justifying unethical actions with excuses. I did this I took this decision because I had no options left. I had to do this way. So many other things. If you take the example of Coca-Cola, once upon a time they were using a very bad quality of water, and the person was saying because they had no choice to do that, because I have no option left, so I have to do that. So this was a known as the rationalization trap. The self-deception trap is wrong labeling of a product, minimizing the perception of harm, the end justify, because normally you see there is a star and conditions apply. When we talk about mutual fund, people are investing, they read all the terms and conditions, and last they will write little very small font, they'll write something which if the person is not going through that, he may be get harmed, or the organization will get a profit there. So now end justify the means trap, using unethical method to accomplish a desirable goal, which I said is very, very, very much like it's a pressure in an order. Every person who is working on a target based. Now, as from Madura in 19, additional ethical trap could be displacement of responsibility or attribution of blame. He made me do that. Sometimes a colleague says that my boss's order was this, so I had to do that. The fusion of responsibility. If everyone is responsible, no one is responsible. Because people usually say in an organization when we are working in a team, it's a team effort. If something goes wrong, it is not. No one is responsible for that. Dehumanization. We think that we are not human being, we are just a product. We dehumanize, we are not having any human feeling with it attached to it. Now next is making ethical choices. If your intent is honest, the statement is ethical, even though it may be factually incorrect. If your intent is to mislead or manipulate the audience, the message is unethical regardless of whether it is true or not. How do we decide this? How do we say that this is an ethical choice? Is this message is legal? We need to relate. We need to understand that. Does it violate the civil law or company policies? How do we? Why we are having these questions in our mind? Just to decide whether we are doing communication in an ethical way or not. Is this message is balanced? Does it do the most good and the least harm? Is it fair to all concerned in the short term as well as in the long term? Does it promote positive win-win relationship? Did you weigh all sides before drawing a conclusion? Is it a message you can live with? Does it make you feel good about yourself? Does it make you proud? Would you feel good about your message if the newspaper published it? If your family knew about it? So these are the questions whenever we are trying to communicate on a larger scale for anything which we are representing our company. We need to evaluate our thing so that we should not be we should have that we are doing it ethical for an organization as well as as an individual. So is this message is feasible? Can it work? Can it work in a real world? Have you considered your position in the company? So these are the basic questions which should come in your mind. Now, when we talk about, since we have already discussed about role of communication, what are the managerial role as defined by Henry Mintzberg? Let us quickly review that. In 1973, Henry Mintzberg, a Canadian academic and author on a business and management, published a book called The Nature of Managerial Work. The data suggested that the managers actually did not spend a lot of time on planning or strategizing. On the contrary, they spend more of their day answering telephone calls, solving problems, dealing with people, responding to crises, and had to deal with the interruptions regularly. He found that the managers could not stick to one task since they were constantly being interrupted by either by phone call or any other crisis. Over the year, manager role have become busier and more stressful. So here we are trying to understand how communication plays an important role when we segregate our role into three different categories. One is interpersonal roles, next is informational role, third is decisional role. So when we talk about interpersonal role, first is figurehead. It includes symbolic duties which are legal, social in nature. The function is more of a ceremonial nature, like attending the family function of the employee, greeting visitors, and a manpower perform the symbolic duty of the head of the organization. Next is leader. Includes all aspects of being a good leader. It involves building a team, coaching the members, motivating them, and developing strong relationships. Next is listening. Includes developing and maintaining a network outside the office for information and assistance. The manager acts as a link between organization and the external environment to build image and the build image and rapid means to have a good rapid with the person. Next is informational rules. One is when we talk about these three are the categories as per the Mintwigs, or how the roles of communication is bifurcated. So next, second is informational rules, in which the monitor it includes seeking information regarding the issues that are affecting the organization. Also, this includes internal as well as external information. When we talk about disseminator, on receiving any important information from internal or external sources, the same needs to be disseminated or transmitted within the organization. The manager has to communicate and distribute information to its subordinates to effectively accomplish the enterprise objectives. Spokespersons include the representing the organization and providing information about the organization to outsider efficiently has to communicate the company's policies to client and other person. Now, decisional role. As an entrepreneur, when we talk about, involves all aspects associated with acting as an initiator, designer, and also an encourager of innovation and change. When we talk about entrepreneur, we take all the decisions. It's a decisional role, basically. Disturbance handler, taking corrective action when the organization faces unexpected difficulties which are important in nature. Next is resource allocator, being responsible for the optimum allocation of resources like time, equipment, fund, and also human resources, etc. Negotiator includes representing the organization in negotiation which affect the manager's scopes of responsibility. So this is all about nature, scope, and process of communication. As I said, communication is this we have already covered. It is a process, it is inevitable, it is meaning based. Communication could be intentional and unintentional. It's a systematic, it's a social process, it is a dynamic process, it is a continuous process. It involves react, interaction and transaction. It's spiral process, it is contextual, it's not needs proper understanding achievement of organizational objectives. These are all things we have covered in our last slide. Now let us understand what is the process of happening. As I explained you an example that I am trying to communicate something, how you are interpreting it, how you are decoding it, and what's your feedback. These three is a one way of communication. So we can say that communication is a two-way process in which there is an exchange and progression of ideas towards a mutually accept direction or goals. For the communication process to materialize, it is essential that the basic element of communication to be identified. These elements are sender, which is encoder, or a speaker, you can say. Encoder means I am trying to convey in your language to make you understand. So here it is encoder or a speaker, you can say. Receiver is decoder or a listener who is listening the conversation. Next is the message, the content which we are trying to convey to the receiver and the sender is trying to send. And what is the medium? How do we communicate either on the telephone or through a letters or through a circulars or through a memos? What is the medium of communication? Now next is feedback. If suppose a department has given a circular or a notice, how many people have understood that? How many people are ready to implement that? That feedback is very important. So when we talk about, this is very clear to all of you, I'm sure, who says, who is telling that and what they are trying to say is message and encoding. The message is now media through which we are trying to process your messages, to whom we are trying to messages, and how we are trying to messages. So elements of the communication, when we talk about referent, motivates the sender to share information, right, about anything, about perception, sensation, emotion, etc., that may initiate communication. Right? For example, a nurse citing a patient with a difficulty in breathing may serve as a referent to the nurse, promoting her to initiate communication with the patient. Suppose he is not communicated, but the nurse has already seen her that he is having problem in breathing. So as I said, element of the communication center is very clear to all of you. I'm not going to repeat that here. Now, message is also, it is an information or a message which is main content of the message, what we are trying to say, which has to be very clear here. So product of pre-writing or pre-speaking stages exists in the mind of a sender, basically. Receiver, as I said, and the medium and channel is clear to all of you. Feedback is also very important because it is a topic that connects the receiver in the communication process with the sender who in turn acts as a feedback receiver. Thus gets to know that the communication has been accomplished, that it has been interpreted in a right way. What is supposed to be conveyed, that we can understand through the feedback only. Encoding is changing of messages into symbols, that is a pattern of word, gesture, pictorial form, or signature, or anything. Decoding is an act of translating the symbol in a communication into their ordinary meaning. Right? So now here we have incorporated two, three models of process of communication. We are going to do it quickly because lot many things to be covered today in today's session. So it is clear to all of you. Now we will talking about the models here. What are the Can I record this video for more knowledge? You need to take a permission from IIBM for that, right? I am not authorized to say that. Right, Tapas? So we'll continue. No more queries is there. We are trying to cover this quickly from here. We are going to review 2, 3 models. I'm going to go fast because we need to complete the whole session which we have talked in the beginning. So first we are talking about linear model. That is a one-way communication process. Basically, we are going to talk here. One-way processes, as we were seeing in the example, previous examples, sender, encoding, message, channel, decoding, and receiver. As soon as the message reaches the receiver, he decodes it and gives an internal response to the perceived message. It is noteworthy that response is not in relation to the actual content, but rather to the perceived content of the original messages. This completes the first phase of communication process, right? So when we talk about two-way, we are getting the feedback. If you look at the example, we can understand it very clearly. We are getting the feedback and what is whether the process is accomplished or not, we try to understand by this. Now, let us understand Shannon-Weaver model of communication. See, Shannon and Weaver were the first to point out that the actual practice message can be changed or blocked. They understood this idea. What they are trying to convey is being changed through the when it is being conveyed to the receiver. So they were the first one to point out. It was based on the mathematical or mechanistic view of communication process. In this, the basic problem is that the message received is not equal to the message sent. He attributed the loss to noise. However, in the Shannon-Weaver model, feedback was not considered to be an integral component because model conceived the communication process as a linear and act as a feedback, another new act of communication. They thought that a feedback is a new way of communication. It's another communication which is being started. This is why in the Shannon-Weaver model is given here. Feedback is shows in the dotted line, which we are going to show you now. However, in Shannon-Weaver model, feedback was not considered to be an integral component because the model conceived as a communication process as a linear act, which I told you now. If you look at the diagram, feedback, they thought it is an entirely new process has started. The one process is up to that only. Information source, encoding process, channel, decoding process, and destination. So this was the basic thing all about. Now next is Murphy model of communication. What they are trying to do here, Murphy model of communication. Murphy has given a model according to which the sender and receiver send, receive, and understand the message on the basis of their individual perception. Like sender is sending based on his experience, attitude, perception, idea encoding, and symbol decision and sending mechanism. The message has conveyed, the receiver will decode according to his perception, attitude, skill, and receptor mechanism, idea interpretation. So this model was based on this. So according to Murphy, this is a context or environment which is the external to both sender as well as the receiver. The receiver and the sender both pick the stimuli from the external environment. After picking the stimuli for the environment, the sender, on the basis of experience, attitude, and skill, perceives this idea, encodes the idea, decide the oral, written, or verbal symbols which he used to send the idea. He uses the sending mechanism, that his words, voice, and other body parts to send the messages. The message is transmitted through the medium to the receiver. Right. He perceived the messages, decode the same on the basis of own mental filter here. That is his experience, attitude, and skills. So on the basis of his understanding, receiver gives the feedback to the sender and the process continues here. Now, next is Thiel and Bovey model. If you see how different it is, according to Thiel and Bovey, the sender of messages perceives an idea which is simplification for the real world outside. He formulates a message on the basis of his idea. Through physical transmission, the idea is transmitted to the receiver. Receiver get the message, understand. Receiver get feedback to the sender, which sent through the physical transmission, right? So what we are basically trying to understand is how the communication process has evolved throughout the different model. Every model you will find little changes of thought. So when we talk about, like, let us take an example, communication of organization policy to the employees. First is ideation. We try to create an idea. This policy has to be done on the basis of the organization policy to be circulated among the employees through news bulletin, as we discussed in the beginning slides. Now, the editor or person who writes the policy is encoder here. Message, the content, and the words picture used to convey the policy to the employee should be clear and precise. Channel, the medium in case here is news bulletin. Receiver is the audience or message for whom the policy is intended and who to read it. Maybe the policy not for applicable to everybody. So receiver should be categorized here for the person, for the basically which is intended to which category should be conveyed to them only. Feedback. Now next is employee reaction to the family, to the feedback. So this is all about how do we communicate. It's very clear if you think in that way, but how the role of communication has evolved during the over the year, that's what we are trying to understand here. Now let us quickly review forms of communication here. As we were discussed in the beginning, there are can be communication can be classified and categorized by many means, but we are trying to cover here on the basis of expression, that is oral and non-verbal. Next is on the basis of organizational structure, we can say formal or informal. On the basis of number of person, how many person are going to receive that? That is intrapersonal communication, interpersonal communication, group communication, and mass communication. So let us understand. So now on the basis of direction, flow, and communication, like how the communication is flowing in the organization, whether it is downward, it is lateral, it is diagonal, it is inward or outward. So now first, let us understand what we categorize here on the basis of expression or medium used. Verbal communication, it means communicating with words, written or spoken. Verbal communication consists of speaking, listening, writing, reading, and thinking. It may be further classified as oral communication or written communication. So it is very clear to all of you. As we say by the diagram, if you look at the diagram, there are forms of communication which is basis of expression or medium used is verbal and non-verbal, and verbal can be again categorized through oral or written. Now, verbal communication is the communication by the use of words and language, communication by using the symbols. It can convey very complex idea and it is necessary for discussion and explanation. It includes everything that is around the speaker as well as the body language. How do you convey? How do you speak when you are talking to a person? It is more controlled. It is instinctively, largely unconscious and very difficult to control. It is always accompanied by non-verbal. Verbal communication cannot just happen without the non-verbal communication. When we talk about written and oral communication is, as I said, immediate feedback can be taken, shorter sentence can be done, more informal, conversational focus, prompt action can be taken. Suppose I am going and talking to a person, either on a phone or a face-to-face conversation. Immediate action can be taken by that conversation. Focus on relations, less detailed technical information is needed, more personal pronouns, simpler construction, more imperative, interrogative, and exclamatory sentences. Review is rare. Less focus on grammar. Local phrases and idioms are used. When we talk about written communication, delayed feedback. Because I have written something either by email or a letter or through a circular, you need to wait for the feedback. Longer sentence, you need to phrase your sentence when you are writing it. You need to have a grammatically, word should be polite and it should be understood by the other person. Longer words, more formal, you can say, focus on content and precision, as I said. Delayed action can be will be there, focus on action, more detailed technical information need to be provided when you are writing anything, fewer personal pronouns, more complex constructions useful for permanent records and detailed documentation, possibility of review, grammar accuracy is used, ensured, phrases and it is acceptable to all are considered. Formal, informal, as we know, we understand, it's very easy to understand. Formal is official language when we are saying precisely written saves time and avoid the embarrassment of face-to-face contact when the subject is sensitive or painful. Disadvantage, it is too rigid, worded in bureaucratic jargon, takes time, money to produce, tend to authoritarian, and being impersonal fail to motivate employee. Formal way of communication is letter, plans, report, formal meetings with higher ranking official. When we talk about informal communication, disadvantage is it is too flexible, difficult to apply systematically. can lead to spreading inaccurate information and indiscriminating disclosure of confidential information through verbal through informal communication, and it can distort the meaning. When we were talking about grapevine communication in informal communication, we do talk about the rumors and misinterpreting the information, informal telephone conversation, informal meeting with worker or emails. So now next category which we talk about on the basis of number of persons, how many persons are going to receive, to whom the message is addressed to. So now intrapersonal communication, it is talking to oneself in one's mind. Example are sides in the dramatic works, means what you are thinking about any information. What's your opinion? That is interpersonal communication. Right? Interpersonal communication, it is an exchange of messages between two persons. For example, conversation, dialogue, or an interview in which two persons interact. An author communicates interpersonally with his reader, who is always present as a silent audience in the author's mind while he is writing. A letter too is an example of interpersonal communication between the writer and a person to whom it is being written. Group communication can be among small or large group like organization, clubs, classroom, which all individuals retain in their individual identity. Next is mass communication. It occurs when the message is sent to a large group of a people, for example, by newspaper, radio, or television. In this process, each person becomes a faceless individual with almost no opportunity for personal response or feedback. So, when we compare intrapersonal and interpersonal communication, intrapersonal, as I said, it's what it's just going in your mind. It has a continuous flow of thought in the mind, does not follow any particular sequence, may be of its are at the subconscious level. Thoughts, views, opinions, and attitudes are the part of interpersonal communication. Interpersonal, as I said, it is between two or more personal persons. It is most important method of building up, maintaining the relationship and of working together. The intrapersonal communication of both person affects their in the interpersonal communication. Right? Because two persons are interacting. The intrapersonal communication will be going in their mind, what they are thinking. So it can affect in their interpersonal communication. For the better interpersonal communication, one has to develop self-awareness to deal with one other intrapersonal communication. When we talk, what the other person's response would be, what he's thinking in his mind, you should have a little bit understanding about that. Now, when we talk about group communication, it takes place in a meeting on understanding the situation, exploring the possibility and solving problems because it follows multiple point of views. When we are talking in a group, everybody will give their viewpoint. It gives the participant an overview of organization and issue discussed and enable them to appreciate other people's point of view. Multiple barriers will have. We will be studying more about barriers in communication. So multiple barrier will be there in when we talk about group communication. The size of group affects its communication. The minimum number is 3 and maximum for effective communication is 10. Through larger group of to 15 can manage to have an effective communication. When we talk about mass communication, it's a big, large, it's a public communication. It's a one way to communicate with include the message disseminated by the radio, television, press, and the cinema. It is used for circulating information and instructions to the people, for disseminating information about themselves, for advertising your product, and for the propaganda. It has a single source and multiple receiver will be there. The content is open to all. Anybody can interpret whatever they are understanding. Our audiences are heterogeneous and it can establish simultaneously contact with every large number of people at a distance from source and widely separated from one another. Now, last category which we were discussing is on the basis of direction and flow of communication. When we talk about basis of direction, flow of communication, first thing come into mind, downward communication. The top management will convey any information to the next hierarchy will convey to the next level, and like that it will go to the line manager or the front manager. So the communication that flows from top to bottom is known as downward communication. In any organization has an inbuilt hierarchical system. Every organization had their structure to work with. In that, the first instance communication invariably flows downward. It is coming mostly from the top management. Upward communication, the communication that flows from bottom to top, which is from lower hierarchy level to higher level. Suppose if the person is working in a plant and he wants to convey anything to the top management about the product, about the machinery problem. So this is known as upward communication. The main function of upward communication is to supply information to the upper level about what is happening at the lower level. It is just the reverse of the previous dimension which we discussed now. Lateral communication, with the communication takes place between two or more persons who are subordinate, working under the same person or working in the same department or a same level. It's called as a lateral or horizontal communication. The good example of this kind of communication is that between functional manager necessary for the reviewing of the activities assigned to various subordinates having the identical position. Now next is diagonal communication. Diagonal or crosswise communication includes flow of information among persons at different levels who have no direct reporting relationship. We have given example here, communication between training supervisor and the marketing manager, because the training supervisor will not be reporting to the marketing manager, but if anything which needs to be provided information by the training supervisor, either by the marketing manager, this communication will happen. This will be known as diagonal communication. Next is inward communication. Inward communication includes all the information received by organization from external agencies such as suppliers, customers, government, and media, among others. That is, we are getting insight from outside. That is known as inward. Likewise, outward communication will be the communication which the organization maintains with the outside world by the various means, mode, media such as ads, tenders published in the newspaper and the magazines, mails, telephonic conversation, is known as called outward communication. So inward, what we are gathering information from the our suppliers, customer, and outwardly what we are trying to inform to the outside is known as outward communication. As I said, channel of communication, we know that it is formal or informal. We have discussed this topic very clearly in last two slides. Formal are the precisely these two forms of communication in every organization, right? Which is bound by rules and regulations. For example, is order and notices. Informal communication includes non-official, unregulated communication or gateway communication. They both exist in the organization, which we have discussed now. Formal channel, that's a horizontal, vertical, downward communication. We have discussed this. This is an example of communication channel when we talk about down and up, right? When we talk about horizontal communication, this is the example of horizontal communication. It can act both oral and written. What we are trying to say here is we are just trying to make you understand what are the type of communication that can happen in the organization. As I said, what are the advantages of horizontal communication? Horizontal communication improves the quality of teamwork. People get to know what the other colleagues are doing. Since horizontal communication means better coordination of individual effort, it ensures better efficiency and better results. Effective horizontal communication helps to eliminate misunderstanding, envy, and prejudice among people of equal status. What are the disadvantages? There may be conflict between horizontal and vertical communication. Horizontal communication takes place more than communication between senior and a junior. Right. So next is vertical communication. It is very clear. We gave the example of other departments in the last two slides. Communication among different levels on the line of authority. Right. A sectional manager speaking to the general manager. Here I have tried to give an example here. Downward, we understand what is downward communication. Advantages, we understand. It helps to maintain the discipline and within the organization, since the level of authority are determined and clear cut, each person knows that he is accountable to his immediate senior. The senior also know exactly the amount of authority they wield so that they are confident while issuing the instruction and orders to the junior. What are the every communication will have some kind of pros and cons here. So here it is the downward communication. The line of communication are often too long. The message get distorted sometimes. Some information is confidential and cannot be communicated downward. Upward is also very clear. As I said, it is from lower level to higher level. These are the example we are trying to create how informal channels create a rumor and a random information, right? Grapevine communication, we have already discussed about it, how grapevine communication happens in an organization. This is an example, and how speedily and how fast it is spreading in an organization. Grapevine communication is one way to spread your news so effectively because people tend to listen, which is not formal, informal flows in order no horizontal and vertical flow of communication spread very rapidly in all channel of communication. It provides feedback to the organization, reaches to everyone. It can be harmful, can be because the information is baseless. It is mostly incomplete. Right. So, what are the factors responsible for the grapevine phenomenon? The grapevine becomes hyperactive when the following factors prevail: the feeling of uncertainty or lack of sense of direction when the organization is passing through a difficult period. Take an example of any company, like last 3 4 months, the automobile sector was in news because that sector was the economic was badly affected by the automobile sector, and the news was going around that so many people will be removed from the companies, and also the lack of uncertainty and lack of sense of direction. So that time this news will be spread very fast. Feeling of inadequate or lack of self-confidence on the part of employees, leading to the promotion of formation of groups, formation of favored group by the manager, giving other employees a feeling of insecurity or isolation. Some unusual happening in the organization, personal problems of the employees. Now, there are types of grapevine communication. One is single strand chain. It is a type of chain A tells something to B, who tells to C, and so on. This chain is least accurate in passing on information. Gossip chain, here one person seeks out and tells everyone the information he or she has obtained. The chain is often used when the information or message is interesting in nature, and sometimes mostly it is non-job related. Probability chain, here the individuals are indifferent to or not really interested in person to whom they are passing some information. They tell at random and those people in turn tell others at random. This chain found when the information is somewhat interesting but really very significant. Cluster chain is a type of chain. A tells something to a few selected individuals, and then some of these individuals inform a few other selected individuals. I am close to some other 4 5 people of person, and I will tell, I'll make one cluster here, another person will make one more cluster here. So Davis is the opinion that the cluster chain takes the form of dominant grapevine pattern in the organization. Because one information I may be close to 4 5%, definitely if rest of the 4 5 are not close to that person, they will spread that news very easily. So, what are the advantages of informal communication? That is grapevine communication. It's speedy transmission. I told you, feedback value. It's above all through the grapevine, the manager or the top person of the organization get feedback regarding their policy, decision, and memos. Supports to other channels. It is working parallelly to other channel of communication. So it is supporting to other channel others. It has a psychological satisfaction because you feel that you know this information through informal way of communication, so it gives more satisfaction. Now, uniting force. They bring together the workforce in matter of common interest and as a result act as a binding force among the employees. Creation of ideas, informal communication through sharing of ideas and views generates more ideas and expectation that often prove of value to the decision makers and planners of goals and scheme. Good personal relations, definitely, which is being shared informal through not a proper channel, people will have more interest in that. So, what are the disadvantages of informal communication? It cannot be taken seriously, we know that, does not carry complete information, distort the information because it is passing from person to person in an oral form, in an informal way. It may prove counterproductive, chances of misinterpretations, lack of accountability. So, it can be used effectively. How to use the grapevine effectively? We first place the tactful manager will keep the employee well informed about the organizational policy matter and plan and prospect so that the anything which should not give a negative rumors among the employee. Fruitful group activities that enhances self-worth and update knowledge should be held as frequently as possible. This will not only boost the morale and the self-confidence of the workers, but also check their inclination to indulge in small talks. Right? The manager should create a healthy environment. How to make the most out of grapevine communication that we are covering here. Rumors which is spreading in the organization should be should not be encouraged, should be controlled. Manager must learn to be a good listener, then only he will understand and clear cut communicate with the juniors what is being spreaded in negative ways, like discriminating is listening, appreciative listening, empathetic listening. Now, patterns of flow of communication or a network. In previous section, we have discussed the formal and informal channel of communication. And as I said, they work both side by side and parallel. An organization develops a pattern of communication to improve its effectiveness, right? So now these are the patterns in which I have covered here what is prevailing in your syllabus here. What are the patterns of communication? When we talk about these, am I going very fast? Clear to all of you? It's fine. See, Bhavani and Tapas, for recording, you need to have a permission, right? I cannot say this. If you have any doubts, I can clarify that right now, okay? Because we are lacking time here, I have to cover one more topic now. So I am continuing, right? Fine. So what we were saying here, we were talking about pattern of communication. So now first is wheel communication. 3% wheel communication pattern, 4% wheel communication pattern, 5% wheel communication pattern, or 5% bi-wheel communication person. If you look at the diagram, first I was trying to say A will communicate to B, A will communicate to C as well, right? If you look at the second diagram, there are 4% involved in a communication. One is A, B, C, and D here. It's a misinterpret. So what we are trying to say here like for communication they are the pattern on which the communication happens in the organization, right? If you look at the another diagram, if you talk about 4% 5% communication in a wheel communication pattern, it happened. What we are trying to say, one department or a person who is not in a different segment can communicate to the B. This is happening in an organization. 5% are communicating and they all are getting the same information at single point of time. If you look at there are pattern of when 5% can communicate in two different patterns. One is wheel communication pattern and another is Y communication pattern. Next is circle. When we talk about 4% circle communication pattern, we look at the diagram here is A, B, C, D, E is communicating to each other in a circle form. All channel 4% all channel communication pattern can happen in a square form, right? Certain other patterns have also been observed, formulated and experimental with kite. If you look at the diagrams here, chain and slash. Now, let us take an example of educational organization. The head of institutional organization will find it more appropriate to adhere to centralized pattern like a wheel while dealing with non-teaching administrative staff, but while dealing with the professional teaching staff, he will have to adopt a decentralized communication pattern, like a circle or all channel. The simple reason is that different type of activities or task level or motivation, accountability, commitment, and willingness to assume responsibility warrant different communication patterns. So what we are basically trying to say, a person has to decide the type of information he has to share, which kind of pattern he needs to choose among all these of pattern which we have shown just now. He need to decide here which kind of pattern he should choose for communication, right? So now next is characteristics of effective business communication. We keep on talking since from the beginning of the slide that how important is to convey your message effectively. So what should be the characteristics of your messages? What are the basic things we need to cover when we are trying to communicate? Now, we should provide the practical information. The business messages usually describe how to do something, explain why a procedure was changed, highlight the cause of a problem, possible solution, discuss the status of the project, explain why new piece of equipment should be purchased. So we need to have a backup with a practical information. Why we are doing this change. We need to communicate whenever we are doing any kind of change. Next is if give facts rather than impressions. So, business messages use concrete language and specific details. Information must be clear, convincing, accurate, and ethical. You must present hard evidence, not just the opinion, and present all sides of an argument before you commit to a conclusion. Right? So, the way you are communicating when you are talking about your facts, your data, and the message is ethical, definitely it will give a good impression and a prominent mark to the person, to the listener, that what he is telling is valuable for them. Next is clarify and condense information. Business messages frequently use tables, charts, photos, or diagrams to clarify or condense information, to explain a process, or to emphasize important information. Next is state precise responsibility. Business messages are directed to specific audience. Therefore, you must clearly state what is expected, what you can do to that particular audience. Persuade others and offer recommendations. Business managers frequently persuade employees, customers, or clients to purchase a product or service or adopt a plan of action. To be effective, persuasive message show readers just how a product, service, or idea will be benefited to them, why they should listen to you. It should be benefited to the other party. It should be very effective. Now, next is how do we communicate? How effective is your communication? Is first point comes in mind is fidelity of communication. The distortion-free quality of message is called fidelity. An effective person gets the message across to others with minimum possibility of misunderstanding. Next is economy. An effective communication within the minimum energy time, symbols, and cues are used to encode messages without losing its fidelity and intact. Next is congruence. An effective communication integrates both verbal and non-verbal cues. Influence. The most important criteria of effectiveness is influence that a communicator is able to exercise over the receiver of the communication. Influence means the communicator achieves the result he intended, right? So, since from the beginning, what we are trying to say, what we are conveying in a business environment, because we are doing some business, we have some target with the organization. How much we are able to convey to the other side, how effectively they are interpreting our message is very important. Relationship building and effective communication contributes to the building of trust and better relationship between source and target. Now, when we talk about an effective message, there are 7 C's of that message. One is completeness, conciseness, consideration, concreteness, clarity, courtesy, correctness. So we understand this term. We'll be going very fast with these slides. The communication must be complete. As I said, keep on repeating that. The information which we are trying to say should be complete. There should not be, people should understand that. Moreover, they are cost saving as no crucial information should be missing. No additional cost incurred in conveying extra messages if the communication is complete. A complete communication always gives an additional information wherever required. It leaves no question in mind of receiver. Complete communication helps in a better decision making by the audience, reader, receiver of the message. Right. Next is conciseness. Means wordiness. Means communicating what you want to convey in a least possible words without foregoing the other C of the communication which we have discussed. Right. We should be time saving. It should not be very lengthy so that the reader should keep on reading for 10, 12 pages to understand what the other person wants that. It should be time saving. It underlines and highlights the main messages as it avoids using excessive and needless words. Concise communication provides short and essential messages in limited words to the audience. Is more appealing and comprehensible to the audience. It should be non-repetitive in nature. Now, next is consideration. Consideration implies stepping into the shoes of others. Effective communication must take audience into the consideration. They should also understand the audience viewpoint. How what the mindset, what the education level in which we are trying to convey our messages. Make an attempt to envisage your audience, their requirement, emotions, as well as the problems. Ensure that the self-respect of the audience is maintained and their emotions are not harmed at all, and emphasize on you approach. So you should empathize. You should put your shoe into other shoe, that if you're trying to say something, what will be the impact on the audience? So empathize with the audience and exhibit interest in the audience. This will stimulate a positive reaction from the audience, because they will feel with a part of that decision, right? So next is clarity. Clarity implies emphasizing on a specific message or a goal at a time rather than trying to achieve too much at once. Clarity in communication has following feature. It makes understanding very easy. Complete clarity of thought and idea enhances the meaning of messages. Clear messages make use of exact, appropriate, and concrete words. Because in the next session, we will be trying to understand what are the format of different types of letters, notices, and communication, business communication, which is happening in an organization. This is today we have just covered and understood why it is important and what is the role of business communication and how an effective messages play an important role in an organization. So next C was concreteness. Concrete communication implies being particular and clear rather than fuzzy and general. Concreteness strengthens the confidence. Concrete message has following features. It's supported with the specific facts and figures. It makes use of words that are clear and that build the repetition. Concrete messages are not misinterpreted. Next is courtesy. Courtesy in messages imply the messages should show the sender's expression as well as should respect the receivers. Because language, what we are writing here, should be very full of, we should be very humble, we should be very polite to convey our message. The sender of message should be sincerely polite, reflective, and enthusiastic as well to show what they are trying to say. Courtesy implies taking into consideration both viewpoint as well as feeling of the receiver of the messages. Courteous message is positive, focused to the audience. It makes use of terms showing respect for the receiver of messages. It is not at all biasness. Now, next is correctness. Correctness is communication implies that there are no grammatical errors in the communication. Correct communication has following features. Message has exact, correct, and well timed. The communication is correct. It boosts up the confidence level. Obviously it will have a greater impact. What we are trying to say, if grammatically it is correct, language is right, then people will understand that very clearly. And it makes use of appropriate and correct language in the messages. So if you summary, I'm not going to repeat this because we have already done that. Provide practical information, give facts rather than the information. It is clarity and condense information, state precise responsibility, what a other person is expected to do. Persuade others and offer recommendations, what needs to be done. So what we here trying to understand what we discussed in the last few slides is 7C of effective communication and what is the relevance in communication. Let us quickly revise that. We talk about courtesy and consideration that improves the relationship. When we are talking with full of courtesy and respectful manner, it will definitely improve the relationship with the other person with whom we are interacting. Clarity makes the comprehension better. Credibility builds trust. Correctness builds confidence. Completeness and consistency introduce stability. Concreteness reinforce confidence that what you are trying to say is very concrete. Conciseness is it saves times. So it is very clear to all of you effective versus ineffective. It fails to capture interest. When we are effective message, I'm not repeating, I'm just trying to make you understand. When we talk, when we communicate ineffectively, what people loses the interest to listen that. It fails to capture reader interest with specific subject. It complicates the sentence structure by ignoring the parallelism, that making the simple idea fact for plan difficult to comprehend, to understand. Does not clarify sequence, order, or event or actions. Now, what is the main idea of the end of the messages? Because the message is very unclear. It's not concrete. It's not full of concrete messages which we are trying to say, waste readers' time with the impractical information that the reader already knows about, that takes too long to get into the point by including irrelevant information, gives impression rather than the fact, making the message less effectively, fails to state when the reader should respond. As we discussed about 7 C's of communication, let us understand 4 S of communication, because S is shortness. We keep on repeating this. It should be very short, clear, and precise. The message cannot be made brief, versatility done away with, then transmission and comprehension of message is going to be faster and more effective. Simplicity, the more simple we are trying to convey our message, it will be very simple for reader to understand that. Strength, the strength of messages emanates from the credibility of the sender. If the sender himself believes in a message that he is about to transmit, then bound to be strength and conviction is whether whatever he tries to state that. Sincerity, if the sender is genuine and sincere and ethical practices are being implemented in the messages, it will be reflected in the manner he or she is communicating. So what is the relevance? When we talk about 7 C's of message or a communication, we talk about their relevance as well. When we talk about 4 S of communication, let us understand if the message is shortness. When we talk about shortness, it is economies. When we talk about simplicity, it is impresses the people or the reader. They they feel it very simple to understand. Strength, it convinces the readers or the audience or the person with whom you're trying to convey. Sincerity, it appeals the person to feel that the person is genuine and whatever he or she is communicating in a very genuine manner. So this is all for today's lecture. I'm keeping 5 minutes for any doubts you have so that we can cover it. Concise point. Okay. What else? What else? Anybody? Bhavani. Okay. This is a point from Bhavani. Rest of the person, do we have any queries to understand? We have 3-4 minutes left. So I'll repeat only concise point now because only when we were talking about 7 C's of communication, we do talk about other C's also. Concise means how concise is your messages. As I said, it's a relevance with the shortness. When we talk about S, let me go to that slide here. So when we talk about conciseness is means wordiness. Communication what you want to convey in least possible words. As I said, it should not be very lengthy. It should not be, and parallelly, it should consider the other C's also of the communication. It should be effective in that manner. It should not be very lengthy, but it should convey your thing the way you want to convey, because you have to make your messages for the other people. It should be time saving as well as should be cost saving as well. It underlines and highlight the main messages if we avoid using the excessive and needless words. Right? Concise communication provides short and essential messages in a limited word to the audience. We should remove unnecessary word from the messages, which is not necessary, which is not has any relevance to the message which we are trying to convey. Is more because people will be more appealing to your messages. They will be giving more interest to your work. If you look at all C's, they all are interrelated. What we are trying to say, it should be short, brief, clear, and you should have a genuine, the way you intend to reflect your message should have a genuinity as well. So this is all about conciseness. Any other thing you have want to know? I can't see any other queries here. So thank you all for listening so nicely. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much for all your cooperation, and we will be covering the next coming up topics in the next session. So Thank you all. So I'm concluding this session, right? Please go through the Google as well, like how when we talk about unethical traps or unethical dilemma, if you Google it, you will find n number of examples where the illegal choices has made through communication, which was conveyed, which we need to know that why communication is important, why communication should be ethical, right? Thank you all. I'm concluding this now. Sure. Thank you.